Hi, everybody. And I think I'm good. I check my mic every time because I'm still scarred from the times that I didn't turn it on. I'm sure you're hearing me okay. At this point, I'm going to go instead of am I okay? Just let me know if I'm not okay. Or either way, just let me know, am I all good? Hope you're all well, lads. Hope you're all set for the weekend. The weekend, which is going to consist of watching TV, sitting on the couch, changing your clothes maybe, perhaps once, or whatever. Weekends are kind of strange at the moment. I saw a funny tweet or meme somewhere that was like, it's Tuesday, or as we now call it, day. It's all day. So people are telling me I'm all good. That is good to hear. So in terms of, I see you mentioning Conor McGregor. I'll actually get to that. I don't have anything hugely insightful to tell you. I'll just kind of riff off of it a little bit. What I will say is, I see Niall McConnell is in the chat, Jim O.D. fan, Susan Brown, Paul O'Neill, Tom Kelly. It's like, what was that TV show? Or what was that thing where they used to call out people's birthdays? It was your man off TV3, Martin something. I'll be like that soon. Hello to Emmanuel Godson. He had 2 steaks for dinner. Nice one. I actually had a big, massive spaghetti bolognese just there, and a big mug of tea and a chocolate cake, and now I'm onto my second mug of tea. So it's getting wild. It's getting wild in the Garrod, Chateau La Garrod. But so I'm very full, which is a nice way to stream. But I'm a little bit sinusy or allergy-ish at the moment. So forgive me on that if I'm sniffly or if I sound a bit whatever. Chopper says calm down. You're talking about my crazy tea night here, but when I read it I was like, do I seem really panicky or something? I was going, Jesus, that's embarrassing. I have to slow down, calm down. No, I know what you mean. I sound a bit covety. Yeah, no, I always get this. Just basically like once a week I'll probably get a little bit sniffly or whatever. Usually I might take a Cyanotab for that, but I don't have any, so that's where I'm at. So yeah, what was I going to say to you all? I had something on the brain there now. I've just got distracted again. So I'm having my tea. I'm chilled out. And I have a few bits to go through. So I just want to talk about a few things, whatever's been doing the rounds today on news and Twitter and all of that kind of stuff. And that's mainly it. I was thinking maybe, I don't know, if I start drying up as we go, if there's not much, if it's boring, then I can do just a little bit of AMA. And AMA is a bit of a freaker because it's like, listen, it's kind of a thing, ask you anything, your deepest, darkest, looking into your soul or your private life or whatever. When I say AMA, right, I don't mean that literally. I mean any little questions, any little curiosities. What do you like? What's your favorite color? What's your thoughts on this or that? Whatever. Feel free to interject or whatever. But I do have subjects as well, so maybe we will keep that a little bit for after. Whatever, really. So yeah, I suppose I should do a little bit of screen share here. Someone said earlier that they're sick. Well, not sick of, but they said they were all COVIDed out, that they couldn't hear any more about it. But I don't know. I have to be honest with you. I'm kind of following it daily, and I'm not done with it yet. I don't know. Maybe it is a bit weak just to talk about that, but it's like, again, I made a little bit of a pledge to some people a few weeks ago that if they didn't want to follow this stuff every day, that I would condense it down a little bit. So it might not be profound, it might not be fresh, or it might be repetitive or whatever. But on the other hand, for some other people, they might like to come here and get a little bit of a condensed down version. So anyway, whatever. More tea. Yeah, do hit the thumbs up, lads. I think I noticed a difference in that yesterday. A lot of people hit like, and it was a little bit less throttled. It got a little bit more kind of a little bit more viewing or whatever, But so it does make a difference if you hit like, and it's it's right there, right? May as well, cost nothing. So yeah, so before you kill me here for I'll try not to sniffle too much. for doing the Corona kind of beat. There's just a few insights I have here that maybe are, I don't know, just something worth riffing off of here. So something I noticed earlier was that, okay, so USA has 900 cases today, right? If you go into USA and you go to New York and you see that they have 397 deaths, that's basically 400 deaths. 400 deaths for 20 million people living in New York State. Italy has 60 million. So if you multiply New York's new death numbers today to the equivalent proportional to Italy, if they had 60 million, it would be more like 1,200 deaths in a day, which would be kind of unprecedented. So it is quite high. Just because that's not as big as Italy's number of deaths at their worst, it's actually higher proportionally. And I don't know how that plugs into overall deaths, because my argument was that Italy has a higher amount of overall deaths or whatever. But the argument I'm back to the thing I've done the last 2 nights, so sorry about this, but I just want to make the point. One of the big arguments skeptics made to kind of disregard Italy was that, well, Italy has the most extremely generous, could we say, way of testing people. So they classify basically any death as coronavirus death or whatever. I shouldn't be saying that term. I'm sorry, YouTube, leave me alone. So unless New York is worse than they are in that regard, then they are having an equal number of deaths. What I'm trying to say is that it's a very, very imperfect science I'm using, because there isn't anything better at the moment. Like when it comes to UK or New York and stuff, enough time hasn't gone by in their case, in their instance, as perhaps Spain and Italy, to garner a solid heuristic on overall how many people died compared to a different time on average. You need a couple of weeks to go by to get that, and that will surely come. But my point is, in the meantime, without that specific data, you can look at something like New York, and while it's an incredibly flawed way of looking at it, I understand there must be some relationship between the fact that New York's numbers are proportionally now far higher than Italy's. Therefore, unless there's a mistake in the or like a huge flaw in this methodology, like that makes it completely irrelevant, you would say that, yeah, okay, so they're basically following the same, all things kind of being equal, which they're absolutely not. They are following, they're going in the same direction. For whatever heuristics we kind of do have right now, they all are pointed exactly in that direction, and they're headfirst into it at 100 miles an hour. You have New York. So, I heard some of the arguments that, like, well, New York, who knows which way it'll go? It might just be the flu. We can't say, it's, Chopper mentions population density. It's like the kind of argument went like, well, we may have Italy and Spain and a lot of these other countries to look at who are further along. But even though that is the case, we can't infer anything about New York yet. Because of, let's say, a few anomalies here or there, we basically have to just say New York could either be very bad, it could be nothing. There's no way to know any better than that. And I would argue that, like, well, there is with these countries, and kind of lo and behold, as we see now already, if you just look at New York's new deaths, 400, which would be 1,200 if it were Italian, if there were 60 million of them instead, we're already into it. So that just tells you that makes me feel like if I were a betting man, which I'm not, and I were to have to bet on, like, will these countries' overall death rates, or at least these states, maybe not for the US, we'll have to see. That would take longer, I suppose. But certainly New York, I'm speaking about hotspots here, where for a combination of reasons, it got out of the horse kind of bolted, and it clearly did in New York as well. But I'm going to sneeze. I'm going to have to, like, mute if I'm going to sneeze. Am I allowed to sneeze? It's going away. I told you at the start, lads, I'm not unwell or anything. I feel absolutely fine. I'm just a bit sniffly, and a bit whatever, sinusy or allergy-ish. But yeah, my point was, so that's New York. And just to take another example, the UK. So we have UK. Where are you? There it is. Okay, so we have 684 new deaths today in the UK. And again, testing and all of this stuff aside, it's a very imperfect measure. But the way I would phrase it is like, yeah, it's a very imperfect measure, but there must be something to do with, for example, like, if a country has officially recorded thousands of deaths or thousands of cases and deaths, and another country has recorded like 10% of that amount. Putting aside corruption and political lies and maybe testing anomalies, you could generally conclude that, like, even though it's not a perfect measure, the country with way more probably has somewhat more, a lot more, and, you know, that kind of way, loosely speaking. I think that common sense would say, yeah, that's probably the case, right? So the UK has 684 cases, and if we just go by that, the UK has 66.5 million people, I think. Something like that. But anyway, they're in the same region as Italy. They're a little bit bigger. So if you just call it 600, basically the point I'm making is that the UK's deaths are now just right up there with Italy's. Italy's were at worst, they were pushing up around 900, something like that, right? And England is a little bit behind Italy in trajectory, or the UK is. So again, this idea that Italy is this extremely exceptional case that can be maybe, I won't say, how would you phrase it, kind of dismissed out of hand by, like, insert, you know, potential factor that explains it, and then that be that. It's like, well, as time goes by now, it's not really the exception, because of course it was followed quickly by Spain. Spain now has more people per capita with it, I think. Definitely, yeah, and a lot more people dying, I'd say, per capita as well, as of now. And you have the Netherlands has quite a few, the UK, like I just said, New York, which is leading the pack in America, but other states too are getting worse. My point is that Italy is no longer really the exception. You would more look to Germany and think of that as the exceptional one, or the anomaly, which I would say is just their healthcare service being quite good, having a lot of ventilators, being quite a large country to absorb it for a little while. I don't know if they've had real hotspots. I won't speak on it because I don't know, but the general takeaway is that they have a lot of ventilators and the best healthcare system, so they can absorb the initial hit, and then it's just a matter of whether the pandemic kind of creeps up on top of them and starts to overwhelm that infrastructure. But yeah, Germany being the exception. And again, I'm open to argument and all this, but what I feel like is that the skeptics will, as this goes on, I think it's already at this point, but certainly within a week or two, Italy will be so unexceptional and will be overtaken, and every country will be at that level, pretty much. And that in the context of all these countries being on lockdown. So we do have that kind of baseline of being like, these countries got like this on a lockdown, you know, it would be a bit worse. The argument from the skeptics will have to, and I'm talking about skeptics of all breeds. So we're talking the far out, call it tinfoil hat, whatever it is. People say that derogatorily, whatever, or libertarians, whatever. It's I feel like that entire side of things will have to come to a place of, the argument will have to be about cost benefit of measures and of potential state opportunism and overreach. It'll basically, I feel like the argument will have to boil down to that, and kind of that alone. And I feel like my point is not, I just feel like that's where it should have started in the first place. To my mind, a look at it from the start would, you know, that's where it was at. And I'm just seeing all of these extraneous things just fall away now, and people become much more moderate on it. And it's just, I said this, I'm not trying to do the whole I said it, I claimed it. It's not like that. And I could hear, I could end up being the most wrong person ever if I'm wrong. But my point is that I did say a few weeks ago that the reason I was trying to grapple with the most far-fetched theories and stuff was to say, listen, government overreach, and is it worth it in terms of lives lost or whatever? But there's no point, just because you want to make that argument, and just because your heart wants to make that argument, and that's your instinct, and that's how you feel, which is fine. There's no point going the easy way out and attaching all sorts of different things to it in order to make the argument. That, when you strip it all away, is just the argument you want to make. Make the argument you want to make, instead of reaching for all sorts of things, different things. You know, I've heard it all from this to that to this to that. Some really far out there theories and stuff like that, and it's like, I don't know. You know, if you don't know that, then maybe just. It sounds to me like, from the reason you're making one argument one day and a different the next day and flying around the place is because, to my mind, I'm not clairvoyant, but to my mind, you have this anti-state, you have this point of view, and then you have a reasoned argument as to why. I mean, is this worth it? Have we ever done this historically? What about the cost? What about whatever? To me, that sounds like the basis of any arguments like that. And I just feel like as these numbers go, the skeptics of all types will be brought to where they should have started. I don't know, and I could be wrong myself. So what else have I got? There's the thing I mentioned yesterday. So if there's one thing we want to talk about on a nice Friday evening, chilling out, is suicide. I'm sorry, but I shouldn't laugh. I'm just being silly. But it came to me that like yesterday I kind of dismissed the idea that we don't know if people would kill themselves or commit suicide because of unemployment, and I still don't know. This was a kind of last minute thing I brought up. But just in terms of what I did find, there's various conflicting papers on that. Again, I can't speak with authority. I didn't go through them fully. And even if I did, I don't have the basis to claim authority or whatever on this stuff. But one thing I did find that was kind of interesting, and this is completely open to correction, but some purported that yes, it does create increase the two correlate, and others kind of less so or whatever. My common sense would say, I don't really need to research this. It makes it 2 and 2 makes 4, right? Simple as. But one thing I found interesting here was this, which is on the National Suicide Research Foundation of Ireland. This is Irish, isn't it? Yes. Was that if you look at it here, it did peak a bit in the 2008 to 2012, which is where you'd be kind of looking for it. And that's granted, and it did decline since, which you would say, well, the economy got better, maybe it declined. But the bit I find quite rather curious is the fact that whatever kind of height it reached in 2011, if you go back to 2004, it's rather high as well. Now, I don't know, was the Celtic Tiger in full flight in 2004? And I was young, but from what I remember, from what I know, we were either right up into the middle of the Celtic Tiger at that point, and if we definitely weren't in a recession either. It was either a moderate economy or a red hot, boom economy, somewhere between there, and it's that high. So again, I wonder, are there other moving parts? Or if you were to, for example, if you were to zoom out from, I found that if you zoom out from like the 1960s or whatever, what you see is it just going up, or whatever way you're seeing my arms here, but it just goes up on like a very steep like climb from then. But that could be a case of measuring. Like people didn't talk about it back then; it was kept quiet. I don't know, but even with that controlled for, you might find potentially that from. I'm purely speculating, but if we could get clearer data on this, it's possible. It's perfectly possible that the rise potentially from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that longer term rise skyrocketing, if that is the case, would be larger. Is that I'm just going to interrupt myself here. Last Trigel says, can't read the chart. Is that numbers or numbers per thousand? That is per 100,000. Does population? I was thinking about that before I posted this because I don't want to look stupid, and I might do. That's fine, but I would have thought that if it's per 100,000, that is controlled for population growth and shrinking because it's just per 100,000. So even if you lose 1 million of your population to emigration, it's still just per 100,000. Does that make sense? Like it's per 100,000, so it doesn't matter if there's 1 million people in the country or 20 million people in the country. The number is stable for that. Let me know if I'm right or wrong about that. I would have thought so. But my point is that like if it climbed massively, if it is a big if, but if it climbed massively, as the chart seem to suggest, and I know what the flaw could be in that, but let's say that flaw doesn't explain all of it, and there is a steep rise. You could see this massive steep rise over the decades from the 60s onwards into kind of, let's say, kind of modern Ireland. And maybe these fluctuations between, I don't know, the early 90s or the 2000 or whenever it was, the only recession I'm fully familiar with is the 2008 one. These more granular recessionary periods might pale in comparison to the bigger climb, the more era stretching across a kind of, not an era, a generation or two, And I would just feel like if the argument, for example, like, my point is that increase and decrease would seem a lot smaller compared to bigger trends. And I'm getting a bit far out here, but one of the arguments for why like Corona, I shouldn't be saying this, but while the virus, the pandemic is bad and we don't want it to happen, but one of the maybe upshots of it, even though we don't want it to happen, is that it global neoliberalism takes a hit. This is a bit of a bold argument, but like, is that if it were the case that suicides had increased as basically global neoliberalism had become more of a thing, a more atomized society, and all of these arguments, all these things, then at a stretch, someone who says this has the upshot of a body blow to global neoliberalism, therefore it might I don't know. As I'm saying it now, I'm like, nah, reel that back in. I don't want it on the record. But what I'm saying is that last night I glibly said, who knows, whatever. And I just wanted to have a look at some stuff and figure it out. And I haven't, like I said, I just pulled this up before we started. So maybe it's worth looking into more, because it is an interesting question. This whole thing of like, intuitively you would say, yes, if hundreds of thousands or millions of people or whatever lose their jobs, well, yeah, that's going to make people despair. But I don't know. It could just be a little bit more 3D than that. There could be a little bit more to it. Who knows? It would be very hard to make an argument, and it would be very ideological to say because global neoliberalism collapses, suicide rates will go down. I mean, I'm reluctant to go all the way and make that argument. You'd want to like really back yourself up there, and it's unlikely. But at the same time, who knows? And that actually brings me on to another point, which is, again, this is very ideological. I'm showing it on screen here. This is very LARPy, I get it. But again, there's no LARP without a bit of reality to it. Or, this might be a bit airy-fairy in the clouds, but it's got a point. This random account, I don't know what it is. They're just kind of, speculating for the future. The pandemic ends and everybody comes out of isolation, but they no longer have any enthusiasm for the normal world. Restaurants and bars open, but sit empty. Cinemas announce the latest movies, but nobody comes. The stadiums never fill. Students never return to their classes. And I've heard some of the, let's say, libertarian or skeptic people talking about this as if it will be a very, very bad thing, like I think John Waters, a very evocative image of that the handshake will become an old kind of dead custom. It'll become extinct. And that would be sad. No argument there. But broadening out from that, it's the idea that it's kind of like this whole idea that we go back to our pods and live in our pods and how bad that would be or whatever. But there's an element as well to like, you could say live in your pod eating bugs and eating impossible burgers and all this stuff, and it's a bad thing, in that sense. But, if you think about your grandparents or great-grandparents, they lived in their house. Let's not call it a pod. They lived in the house, they had a family. It's very different from eating your bugs on your own in front of a telly. I get that. But just because society reels itself back in and becomes a little bit more insular, it could be either eating bugs, bad thing, or it could be like your great-grandparents, kind of good thing. Do you get me? I feel like there's two ways to look at how that could potentially play out, and depending on which way it unfolds, there's kind of, the eating bugs thing is like positively dystopian and almost a bit imaginative or whatever, and so is like sitting around a fire, playing music with the grandchildren around. That's obviously that's a bit exaggerated in the other direction, but my point is that there are, it doesn't have to, it could be a good thing in its own way too. The idea that you consume less, you become more self-reliant. I think even if this went away now, there are kind of deep wounds and people will be thinking more about the idea of self-reliance. And it's just a shift in mentality that, again, I'm not saying it'll be a good thing. And like, an end to global neoliberalism. It's going to be amazing, amazing. That would be very silly. But what I'm saying is that there are positives that can come out of this too, for the same reasons as you could argue negatives come out with it, or come from it. Sorry. Do you know what I'm saying? So you get my point. And that's very ideological. I know it's very kind of like meme-ish, but I think there is an element of that. It's a thing a lot of people I know have realized, like, I don't need to, I don't need to compulsively buy things. Maybe I don't need, like, a lot of people spend a lot of their time just leaving the house to just go to a shop. That is literally a way of life. And it's very odd. And once you're cut off from it, you realize I don't need to do that at all. There's an element of that could be good. Basically, this tweet might be a bit fanciful, but there's an element of that could be good. And between that and the kind of suicide rates and stuff, I'm just thinking about, yes, the unemployment rate is a bad thing. People need bread on the table. But who knows what way that'll go exactly. I'm just saying, for all the downsides of this, there can and probably will be certain upshots and all that would, in their own strange way, be positive for society. I don't know. I'm just checking the chat. Someone says suicide rates drop in inverse correlation to Netflix and online usage. People are sedated. Yeah, that's all I was saying, is that just, the unemployment goes up, suicide goes up is not the only moving part. In any situation, these things are always going to be a little bit complicated. And while the odds are that is the case, that correlation probably is the case, we will have to kind of see this stuff play out before assuming the most dystopian elements of it, in the same way as if I were to just assume, it's going to end global neoliberalism, we're going to be in a running through, women running through wheat fields and celebrating trad life and this and that and all this weird stuff that you see on the internet. Back to trad life, in the same way as me going way off on this utopian kind of dream about that would be ridiculous. And I just think also to say it's going to lead to eating bugs and everyone committing suicide, and that is definitely the case. I don't think so. I think both can be kind of interplaying with each other as they go. Maybe I'm kind of talking shite. I don't know. So I'm looking at the chat and I'm looking back at my source material. So Conor McGregor. So he said, for those who haven't seen this, he tweeted today saying, we need Irish produced equipment items, and we need it yesterday. Western produced at the least. Please, if you can assist, enter here and join the fight to support our neglected frontline staff. They do not deserve the treatment they've received over the years. Ireland, stand up. Now, this is a little bit of it's a good point here by Critique. Catholic Ireland was not as suicidal because of the religion. People were afraid of the consequences, and there was little personal debt compared to now as well. So again, I'm talking about stuff like that. The entire structure of our current society as is, while there might be variation between current society on the better end, current society on the worse end, it might go up and down. That kind of vary. But my point is that if society, compared to other societies, that's only within the same system. Whereas if the system itself were to change, or if you were to look to a different system, like, I'd have to back this up, but I think suicide in Africa is a lot rarer. And, by different cultures and different, like Critique just said, Ireland in the past probably wasn't as high, I would imagine. Although it's impossible to prove or disprove, I think. But yeah, so that's that argument, that if this changes society in any kind of positive way as well, that kind of might have an impact too. So yeah, is Conor McGregor based or based by accident? Karen took the kids, says. I'll give you my thoughts on that. First off, I think this is what would you call this tweet? What's the thing they call Nigel Farage and Trump? What's the word? Demagogue, whatever it is. It's demagogic, I think is the word they say for that. you know what I mean, Ireland stand up. I think he's positioning himself as this kind of political figure, as this populist, which I don't see as a bad thing at all. But at the same time, I know it when I see it. You know, okay. The important part is that his populism contains a kind of a nationalist kind of vibe to it, and I've seen it repeatedly. You know, the guy. I'm just going to claim it now, and you can say I'm lying. But when I first heard about him, there were a few little moments between him and the guy he fought, the big Spanishy Mexican fella, Nate Diaz, whatever, and a few others and stuff. He had some incidents, on PC incidents and stuff like that, where he got in trouble. And it became very clear to me that like this guy looks like the kind of guy who runs for something at some point eventually. And he also is a nationalist at heart. And I also think, what's his name? His buddy. What's his coach's name or whatever? John something. You can tell me in the chat. But John Kavanagh, I think. So the reason I've had this feeling, and this isn't based off of his tweet today, whatever, this is a feeling I've had for a long time. And again, I'm not defaming or making claims about what these people believe. I'm telling you what I believe they believe based on just my observation of their public appearances and stuff. I'm not accusing them of anything or ascribing any mentality to them. It's just like I'm allowed to say what I think they might think, you know. John Kavanagh did a podcast, and it's actually very funny. I remember it from ages ago with Gavin McInnes. So he's friends with Conor. They're all buddies. Conor's had his own PC accident. My point is that my feeling about Conor and John, and just mainly Conor really, I suppose, is that I don't know where exactly they stand in beliefs, but they know. You know, the way you talk about a normie or a complete blue pillar, right? A complete, you know, whatever. It's not a matter. They just don't know. They just don't. Whereas I look at Conor and I look at Kavanagh, and you know, when you're training and sparring and all that stuff, there'd be a lot of nighttime. You know, when you're training hard, a lot throughout a day, professionally. When you're not training, what you're doing is keeping your feet up, resting. You're just chilling out. So you'd be doing a lot of watching this and that. So I think they know. I think the guys know. I think they have some awareness of this whole dissident right kind of world. And I think I'm sure of it. That's my feeling anyway. And so I think Conor will go for a kind of populism here at some point. I do think he'll run for something, and I think it'll be heavily informed by this kind of nationalist sentiment or whatever, and that will rub up against the media. And part of his play, if he's smart, will be to do that, to rub up against them. He's done it in his promoting himself in his career. It makes perfect sense. And the thing will be for him to touch up against some of the kind of real stuff in Ireland, and I think that could be valuable to him. He doesn't need to appear talking to, you know, like him and Gran Torino or whoever it happens to be, someone out there being best buddies, but just that whole world maybe coming into contact. I'm talking about the retweet here or there. I'm talking about the whatever. And for the NGOs watching this, it's going to happen, and you won't be able to stop it because someone like McGregor will want to do it. It will boost him, and the more you get annoyed at it, the more it'll actually be good for Conor. I'll be loving it, and the more you react, the worse it is. So it's not much you can do about it. I have that feeling about it anyway, and you know, that's just that. Interested to see what you guys think. See what you guys are saying. Last Trugel says he would be a huge help for us. Cantankerous says McGregor watches PragerU. I'd have to see some evidence of that. I don't know. I don't know what the crack is there, but I can't see it. Auric Dental says Garrow discussed the forthcoming insane budget deficit, maybe 15 billion in the red. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not much of an economist, so you can call that me taking the easy road out, but I'm not. My take on it, just from a surface level, this is completely ignorant. I know at some point the bread has to be on the table and labor has to be compensated, and the world has to go around a little bit. But to me, when I look at macroeconomics, I kind of look at it all and I go, and I don't know anything about fiat this or that. I don't know in detail any of this stuff. This is just purely looking in as a whatever. I just get the feeling that at this huge macroeconomic scale, money is kind of fake. I don't know. I hear about MMT, modern monetary theory. I don't know too much about that either. But my feeling, and I'm open to being informed better on this stuff, is that massive macroeconomic stuff is kind of fake, and it's built on kind of power and various things like that. Like you look at US with their dollar, and just this kind of pumping money out of central banks and into markets and all of this stuff. I do wonder, how much this stuff matters. Now, I know Irish people, there's austerity. Still need someone to explain. I'm happy to admit when I'm ignorant. I know there are consequences to it, but I feel like when shit hits the fan, they are able to just write stuff off, and to an extent. I actually do have someone who said they almost committed to coming on. I won't say who for that reason. Someone who knows a lot about central banking, someone who's basically an expert in it, central banking and federal reserves and all that kind of stuff, who, to my best knowledge anyway, is not crazy, is not just Cat Hanker says money printer go burr. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I feel like money printer can just go burr if it needs to, Last Trigale says the problem is when you run out of debtors. See, this is how ignorant I am. Debtors means a person who you're in debt to, someone who loans you money, basically. Yeah, I don't know. We could go on for that all the time. I'm not completely dismissing it out of hand, like a 15 billion deficit and all that. I'm not dismissing it out of hand. I'm sure it means something. But at the same time, in a crisis period, if it's bad enough, it's almost like they would squeeze the people because they say we need so much money. But if the people were to kind of, if it were to be shown that, no, you can't do that, they're just going to like drag you out of your parliament, basically. They would be able to just go, okay, we can just make it kind of go away a little bit. I don't know. I don't want to speak in it because I don't know very much. It's kind of instinct. Just because of the way money is spoken about these days, and billions and trillions and market injections and this and that and the other. I don't know. It all sounds a little bit fake to me. Chopper says we were already 212 billion in debt before Corona. Yeah, maybe it's just like the attitude of the person who drinks and gets in debt and whatever. And at a certain point, maybe they're so in debt anyway, they just go, is there any point in even caring about this anymore? I know I'm not going to pay off whatever I'm already meant to pay off. So what's the difference, right? This whole system already became dysfunctional and had its kind of, the writing was on the wall for this system anyway. That this couldn't last forever. Therefore, the young will be slammed with taxes. Yeah, Last Trugale says will be an extra 20 billion on top of the 212 billion. Maybe it's just the extent of it. The numbers are so abstract to me that it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I'm sure there are some consequences to that. But at the same time, it feels fake to me. I don't know why. The young will pay lots of taxes. Yeah, I don't know. That's the quickest way I could phrase it. I don't know. But so McGregor, yeah, I think McGregor is one to watch. I have like several ones to watch, but I don't want to name them, because you don't want to get them in trouble. I want to let them come out in their own time, that kind of way. Yeah, so keep your eyes on him. Central banks are private organizations that charge interest on the money they print, says Stephen Noon. So yeah, so they print money and they charge interest on it. But then they lower the interest rates to very, very, very little. And as far as I know, give it to banks, and then banks can loan it to people, but they don't, they can get money at zero interest sometimes, but then they don't give people mortgages at zero interest. So that's something for me straight away that raises a red flag. And maybe I'm getting that wrong or whatever, but that's my feeling on it. So what else had I got here? Oh, this is just funny. This is a silly thing here, but this was after Conor's post, this African guy, Mr. Prodiga, some kind of, I think maybe Nigerian guy. Yo, Conor, what's up, man? Can you help someone in another country apart from Irish? Have been your number one? Have been your fan from? This is so badly written. Have been your day one fan from this side of the world, Nigeria. We need help. Starvation is taking out people, bro. Which, like, you know, who cares, the random Twitter user, but he's saying, like, what's the story about you caring about Ireland? Help us. It's kind of like, it's like, help yourself. Like, get your own celebrity to help your own country. Like, he's Irish, he's going to help us. What's your problem? And but the reply was gas. Text Bono. Love it. So I included that too in my, you know, deep, profound presentation tonight. Just a random assembly of things I saw on Twitter today. But why not? There's one more thing here. I don't know if you've seen this. And let me know if you're not hearing the audio. But I mentioned, what was the guy yesterday in New York? Anybody remember the guy's name? The New York guy who poached like 300,000 N95 masks and all of this stuff. The man from New York. His name was Baruch something. But there was another incident of this and it's just a really funny video as well in its own kind of way, because it's in Connecticut in America. Apparently there's like administration or someone is basically commandeering supplies from the hospital, and the nurses are clearly saying they want their own supplies. They want to keep their supplies. You're taking our masks, you're taking our whatever. And so they start hunting the guy out the door, taking videos of him and shouting at him. But even though it's in Connecticut, which you would think is just a bunch of Americans, Muskerry team says Keith Woods and McGregor double act. You'd have to do a fly on the wall documentary though. I'd say Keith Woods and John Kavanagh could get on. I don't know about the other one though. But yeah, so in this just outside this hospital, so it's in Connecticut, it's in America, but what it is actually these two like Jamaican or Caribbean women, Caribbean, kind of chastising this Jewish man who's taking all the stuff for whatever reason. So you have these two Jamaican women chasing after this Jewish gentleman, and it's just basically kind of funny, but it also is like, you know, enlightening. Let me know if you can't hear it or can. No sound, yeah? Hold on now. Bear with me, lads. Don't run away. How about now?
It's going into a car. It's maintenance to take it out to its car. These are the supplies that we're supposed to be using for the virus. Now it's going out the building. It's going into a car. It's going into a car. And I'm telling this to the Minister of Health. This is supposed to go to the Minister of Health. We have people with the virus in the building. And now this thing is going in his car. He's moving it out the building. Come on the phone.
Hear me now.
Come on your phone. This is going into the administrator car. When let them work because them unprotected. They're leaving us unprotected. Very unprotected. All of this stuff now is going into the administrator car. Can you believe me? Millie, where your phone? This is. Pilot, leave the box. Make him carry it. No, leave it. Pilot, make him carry them. No,
make
Pilot,
him carry
leave
them.
it. Leave it. Pilot, leave it. Cut. Leave it. Leave it. Leave it. Make him carry it. Leave it. Make him carry it, Pilot. Because these are gowns. See? Pilot, leave it. Pilot, move. Move, Pilot, move. These are gowns. See? Who's taking it out? Pilot, leave it. Pilot, leave it. Leave it. Leave it. At the
Demand him.
Jones, what call News 12? What call News 12? How can you let your staff unprotected and taking out supplies in time like this to take somewhere else?
I've heard it said before that a Jamaican accent is kind of like a Cork accent, and there's definitely some truth. There's a little Venn diagram space in the middle where they are similar.
Elephant, how could you do this? Elephant. Violet is it. You don't have to see.
I don't know why she's calling him Elephant. You're Elephant. So yeah, I'd like to see them. I'd love to see a one-on-one, like bare knuckle between the two of them, the Jamaican lady and the Jewish mask hoarder.
Just get
Or whether maybe they're not for him. I don't know. But the guy anyway, between the two of them, it would just be a nice spectacle.
the name, and that's all about it. See there? That's it. Him a carry them where? See there? Him show them say him have it, but now it's in Elephant's vehicle. Okay, people in Connecticut, this is what's happening to us here at Greenwich. At Greenwich.
Connecticut is lit. Connecticut is lit. So someone asked me if I've seen the laptop lady video. Yeah, I don't have it handy. If someone wants to throw it in the chat, I'll drag it over. But there's this Asian lady in a like a Curry's PC World type of shop in America somewhere. And again, it's the beauty of it's kind of these cultures clashing with their kind of personalities. You have this Asian lady who's like just kind of keeping to herself, and she's just going around to all the laptops, touching all of them, like really touching them a lot. Like the way you might check one, you might touch one to check it, but like she's like checking all of them and like touching them so much more than even you would need to, like even if there wasn't a pandemic. And there's this African American lady who's like, ma'am, you got to touch all those laptops, ma'am. You got to touch all those laptops, ma'am. And there's such hostility between them. The Asian lady is like ignoring her. It's very funny. But there's a lot of these incidents I find looking back in time, you know, the way we see reeling in the years for maybe a time before you were born. It'll be like people will see reeling in the years and like fat people like slapping each other like for toilet roll. And weird kind of incidences like that. It's very funny. You know, it's not quite the World War Z we were expecting, not quite yet anyway. But that was that. And then this is just a positive thing, actually. Population decline slows in January in Hungary. So Hungary, I think last year or maybe before that, introduced a pro-natal policy to encourage women or more children to be born, basically for families to have more kids. And the common kind of thought on it all along was that, well, these things don't work, unfortunately. Even if you do like a pro-natal policy, you know, I don't know, do they really work? Well, this has worked, it seems, which is a great thing. So the key thing is that their fertility rate went from 1.4 to 1.6. It's a 0.2% increase, I think, in a year, which is pretty good. Another 2%, you're at 1.8. 0.2. Like after that, and you're at 2%. Back to normal. You don't need to import the entire world just to like exist as a country, and all of the problems that inevitably come with that. Yeah, throw us a few more likes there, lads, for whoever's just joined us maybe in the last little while. Throw me a like, smash the like. I would greatly appreciate it. So yeah, that's just a very good thing, and it's not in this article. Again, the measures were something like you can look up, you know, you can find these things if you're really curious, but it was something like, you know, you have more than 3 kids, you get a certain tax break, or you this and that and the other. It's financial. A lot of it's economic, and you know, it's very easy to build in incentives to things to say, you know, you have a few kids, life gets a little bit easier in many ways for you. Which I think from a state needs to, for a state to exist, it needs people, it needs a future. And a state, I've always thought this about the Hungary thing versus a place like Ireland. A state has 2 options when it's losing its numbers population wise. It needs people to exist. The state needs to. It doesn't just say, oh, people might have kids, or there might be people. They need it. So you're actually doing a favor to the state by having children. You're saying, I'm creating people here who will form this country and ultimately be kind of taxpayers and producers and consumers and all of that, right? The state needs people. It's not that people, like, the state depends on a future, and especially to prop up the demographic pyramid. Did I say demographic period? I don't know. It's getting late, but you know, pensions and all of that stuff, right? So they need to invest in people. And what's very funny is that a country that's can't afford people or sees down the road a shrinking of the pyramid, say at the bottom, they have two options. They either do pro-natal policy, because you could say, why would they pay money and give breaks to women? Is it that they really care about like the ethnic group or any of that stuff? It's probably some of that in Italy with Orban and stuff, and the culture and whatever. But it is also the state has a responsibility to invest in that for its own good. So think of it as an investment, not a handout. That's the way I see it. And a place like Ireland and a lot of other countries, instead of making that investment and saying, listen, it might be hard, pro-natal policies don't work everywhere, but we're going to do one better. We're going to go as far as we have to until we can incentivize people, because ultimately a lot of people do want to have children. Let's just do that until we get the numbers we were looking for. That's got nothing to do with forcing people to do anything. You don't need to do that. Or you can just say, hey, you can be anti-natal, which is what Ireland has been and many other countries, and you can just import people from all over the world, culture clashes, difficulty, language translation, blah, 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 you name it. A lot of problems to that. It's not natural either. It doesn't come about naturally through families and interlocated communities and all of that. It doesn't. It's highly unnatural. And like, I don't need to tell you guys, comes with a lot of problems of its own. Many different. It's not just to do with like, oh, I don't like different people speaking different languages. That's one thing, but it goes far beyond all that stuff. There are real tangible ways in which it's problematic, and it's just treason in the long run. If you look at a nation state, you know, think about it over a 100-year period. That is giving away your country or letting it go, letting it become something completely different, letting it become an airport. Because you're too lazy or you're too cowardly to just try to just address the problem. Say, we're not having enough children and we'd like to have more. We don't need to put guns to people's heads. We can do it consensually and actually help people who already want to do that. Just make it easier, and we can get those numbers up and we can have a future. Someone here says cost of life goes too high. Yeah. So addressing cost of living, trying to make that's effectively what a good pro-natal policy is that you're saying one of the cheapest ways you can live is to have a nice family. That doesn't mean life is free or any of that, but just one of the most, you know, in terms of all the margins of inputs, outputs, you know, challenges, barriers and all of that. Think about it in Ireland, a couple who are in their 20s or basically their late teens, their early 20s, their 20s, even in their 30s, whatever, or even their 40s. But people having kids, I mean, they're not going to say, oh, we could have 3 kids. I mean, that's basically the most harmful thing you could do to yourself financially, you know, from scratch. If you have none, it would just be a very scary prospect, because you go from maybe you could just eke out living in a flat or whatever it is. Now you have to have a house with rooms and blah, 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 blah. It's very hard. A lot of people will feel that way in Ireland, and you should just take that away. That's all you need to do. You just need to say, you could continue to rent, or you could continue to be single or childless or whatever. But you don't necessarily need to see having kids as this massive cost. We'll deal with a lot of that for you to a great extent. All you just worry about having kids and having your job and all of that stuff. But in terms of it costing you more, we'll try to cancel out a lot of that extra cost. So you just focus on your life and your family, and you're developing your own life, right? That's just a much better option, I would say, than importing, you know, so many other people from so many different places. So it's good to see that Hungary have done that. You have a 0.2% increase in the fertility rate over a year, unless I'm mistaken, if I'm not mistaken. That is really, really good, and I'm delighted to see it. So I'm going to basically leave it there. I don't know if I might take the weekend off, because it is nice to kind of have the chunk of time for a few days a week in the evening to yourself. But marry a rich person, yeah. There's only so many of them, you know. That's the problem. Unless we do polygamy. then like 10 women can marry one rich guy, and we can be like, we can do what Avril crying once. That's a long story. I got my Twitter throttled like years ago because I criticized this academic who was advocating for Islamic polygamy in Ireland, which she was, and she complained me to Twitter, and they wrecked my Twitter page. They throttled it. But anyway, that's a story for another day. Yeah, I could go with this whole like ask me questions and stuff, but you know what? You've other things to do. Actually, you do have other things to do, and so do I. Because before I started this video, I noticed there is a little internet saga. Oh, actually, one of you kind of asked me maybe to mention this just in the chat a while ago. So this ties in neatly. It's the someone said in the chat just a while ago, Keith Woods has denounced Irish nationalism or something like that. And I don't know, like my thoughts on that are, yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit of a pro Keith, and I see a lot of Irish nationalist accounts and all of that stuff. Not everybody by any means, but there are some who are like, who've been trying to roast him in his replies and stuff like that. A lot of very good accounts, very intelligent and insightful accounts. I just happen to disagree with a lot of it. I'm not going through it point by point. I'm not going through it point by point or doing this like autistic, like in-depth analysis of every point ever made on this or whatever. Just generally speaking, I like the guy. I like his nation state says he's a shill. He's working with Richard Spencer, for goodness sake. I may have to say that, like, but you know, I don't know, shill. These are all, depends what you make of that word and what you're talking about. I doesn't particularly bother me what he's doing, but his content, his critique, all of these kind of things. I've heard all the criticisms in the replies of him from the Irish nationalist side, but I agree with a lot of it. I think and you might be giving out to me now as well, but I just think there's an element of triggeredness, you know, and I've always wanted to resist insofar as I'm a little figure on this scene, like there's people watching the stream now. I kind of count for something, I suppose. I've always said to myself that there's a time when I thought of myself as me and some people I would liaise with on this stuff as the cutting edge of the kind of discourse and narrative formation and all of that kind of stuff in Ireland anyway on a lot of this. And I always kind of promised myself that if and when anybody comes along who kind of criticizes upwards, so, you know, I might say, oh, the kind of Catholic pro-life movement and all of these previous iterations of things that happened in Ireland were flawed, they're mistaken. All of these newspaper journalists, the kind of, what do you call them? The token conservatives on the TV, you know, the ones I'm talking about, I don't need to name them. I could criticize them and say they're wrong, they're going about it all the wrong way. And I always promised myself that as I get old, whether I'm getting old, as I move on, as I get more into this stuff or whatever, if and when people come along and they have the same way I would critique upwards, or I don't want to put a direction on it, but you know what I mean? I would critique what exists already. And I thought I'm really, really smart and whatever, you know, to these guys. I felt like whenever someone comes along and feels like they're really, really smart and are critiquing maybe where I'm at or where my contemporaries are at or whatever, you get what I'm saying? I wouldn't take it in bad faith, even if the person was a bit brash or a little bit rough around the edges or went about it a certain way and all of that stuff. I said I would always try to look at the effective critique that is going on there, so long as it's in kind of good faith, and so to some extent or whatever. I would always try to take the thing at face value and actually grant it, not only listen to it a little bit, but listen to it a lot. And instead of focusing on too much on, hey, where is that wrong? I would look at where it might be right, and where it is right, I would just integrate it into my worldview instead of the starting position to be abrasive, resistant, and I'll say kind of triggery about it, kind of like the instinct to be a little bit triggered by stuff, to just go be the complete opposite to that and try to absorb what I think is right from people, even if there's loads I disagree with within it, whatever. And that's someone like Keith is a fantastic example of that. I've had there was a point he was bringing up about 2 months ago. Again, it was another abrasive little rub up against this kind of Irish nationalist scene. And whatever it was, I've forgotten what it is now, but I disagreed with it. I don't know if he knows this. I don't know if I don't think I ever really discussed it with him. But my feeling at the time, and I can't even remember what the issue is. It's not a big deal. But my feeling at the time was that he's kind of strawmanning. Whatever it was, I was like, there's a flaw in his argument. It's not just that I disagree with him or he's criticizing something I believe or whatever. I think his argument is flawed. I think he's actually missing something. I think he thinks he's onto something, but actually he's missing something himself. And I had that point of view on it, whatever. But I do appreciate that his takes are pretty spicy and they're pretty good. He's thinking deeply on things. He's got that kind of whatever. I don't want to just do this critical analysis. You can watch his videos, whatever. But my point is that he's a critic. He's a critiquer. And some people, all of these criticisms people make, whatever. But I see the upshot is that he's a sophisticated thinker. I see all these criticisms, and I mean, I don't get it. Nation State said he's reading from a prepared script. I mean, what am I reading from? I'm reading from some stuff I've absorbed from other people. I don't like cook up everything myself. I mean, the guy reads a lot of philosophy, a lot of this, a lot of that. Absorbs probably some stuff from the kind of what would you say? There's the kind of alt-right scene and all of that. But you hear the guy talk about all of he reads a bit too. Like he only reads off a script in as much, to my mind, as anyone does. Because nobody's making it, it's just pure essence of, I made it up myself, or it's Galileo, Irish nationalism and sovereignty says, okay, you're being very fair. I have to be loyal to my people. And that's an issue I have as well. And I don't want to like give away private communications I have with people. So I can't do that. But the thing I've said to someone recently is that as much as I have an issue with some of the crowd, like the last week, the bit of disagreement that's been going on between the different takes on the pandemic, there's a bit of bridge burning going on and all of that. And I said to someone recently, I kind of almost want to burn a bit of a bridge. I won't say with who, it's not a specific person, just with certain points of view that I'm like, listen, it's got nothing to do with me. Almost want to burn a bridge. And I was just making the point to them that I know a lot of the people I'd supposedly be burning a bridge with, and politics aside, I know them and I really like them. So there's more to this for me than mere ideological, I don't know, purity is a word, or like integrity. You could use a better word to say integrity. It's not just ideological for me. And people could say, he's abandoning, for like American discourse or something like that. I don't think he's abandoning Irish. I don't think so. And I think he's kind of got an abrasive way of going about it and all that. But again, I think the smart person here, like me, right, would, instead of doing that, there's no point getting like internet drama about it. Like, I don't go, he's abandoned. I mean, we're not related. I don't know the guy very well. I know him through this stuff. So I have zero personal, if he said something amazing about Irish nationalism or something like that, first off, I don't have a brand connected to Irish nationalism TM anyway, in the first place. And secondly, I don't have this personal thing where like, oh no, they abandoned this and that. It's just ideological stuff. For the most part, he didn't like say he is abandoning Ireland. He hates the Irish nation or anything like that. What he was saying was, insofar as like you could say Irish nationalism Inc. or like Irish nationalism as it is now, as is understood. There's a couple of figures there. There's a couple of parties there. And more importantly than all of that, there's a kind of an agreed on overall narrative and worldview. And he was kind of saying, I am not that worldview. That worldview, I have my critique of it, ABC, and that ain't me. That's very different to like burning the flag or saying he hates all Irish people. It wasn't that. It's very different. And my instinct is to say, look at the guy's critique. I mean, you're completely wrong if you go saying he's talking complete nonsense and he read that off a script and he this and that. Maybe those things can be true to some extent, but to just dismiss it all like that is very silly. And also, if you don't stress test your own ideas and you don't put them through it like that, that's why I like someone like him. I think he's an absolutely amazing. I'm grateful that we have someone like him happens to be Irish, because of course other countries have their equivalents, maybe, you know, that type of thinker. I'm very lucky we finally have one of them in Ireland. Brilliant. So he'll turn his eye back on us once in a while. And I think it's valuable. I see that Don is in the chat. I always like to hear from the Don. I see there's a comment up here. I'm going to read it out for myself. I like to see people have different views. There is too much cult-like behavior in small online groups, and some people are disassociating from reality. I agree and disagree with Keith on things. That's it for me too. Yeah, and he didn't disavow. It's not like, I think cult was a word used there. Yeah, it's not like there's some cult. That's why I said early on, I want to make sure that when there's some, call it a kind of hotshot here who's got his critique of the pre-existing thing, and maybe in some way I'm connected to the pre-existing thing, I don't want to be that person that shields up from it. Because that's the biggest criticism I had of the people I have previously done that to, is like, why don't you just be open, integrate me where I'm right, and let's do that. What's with the wall? What's with the reactiveness? What's with all that? Why don't you just take, if I'm right to the point where you have to kind of hide from it or get angry about it, why not just not do those things and just like take it on board or whatever? Insofar, it doesn't mean you believe everything I say. It just means that insofar as I'm right, which we know I kind of am on some stuff, why run? Or why get angry? I feel like getting angry is a form of that. And it's just that cult-like thing of like, he said this about whatever, so therefore he insulted Irish nationalism. I don't want to be part of a thing that's like that either. It's just, and it's not that I'm not saying he brought this amazing idea and it's whatever, critique it, have an issue with it. I'm sure I have a few of my own. I think I don't know. I'm sure I could kind of argue some of those points, but it's like, that's not the point. It's just that I have some issues with it. I don't agree with everything he said, but this idea that I'm offended or whatever, you know what I mean? He's trying to make a point, and sometimes I feel like he's a little bit, even using the term post-truth was kind of borrowing the terminology from the Russiagate 2016 kind of Democratic Party of the US. So that almost is a little bit, to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but to me is a bit tongue-in-cheek. But I don't care about that all. That's all superficial. I ignore that, whatever. I'm not offended. I want to peel all that away and go, what's the essence of his argument and how true is it? How true is it insofar as any of it is true? And I look at it and I go, a lot of that argument is true. A lot of that has a point insofar as I believe it. And there are other people who I respect and I don't even like saying them, but just people we know in this sphere who don't have that point of view. And I can kind of get on with them too, you know. It's just, I don't know. It's just, Morgoth's review had a tweet on this earlier. Someone called him like an insulting word for having a point of view. And he was just saying, who would act like this in the pub? There is a kind of a poisonousness to, and I'm not saying anyone who criticized Keith Woods is poisonous. I like most of the people that were criticizing him in their own rights. But just there's an element of if you were in the pub, you would know would be getting that triggered or that offended, and the moderation would happen via conversation. It's kind of like what the Don said just a while ago. It creates, what did he say? People disassociating from reality. When you're in reality and you're talking, you can find the common ground there. You could listen to Keith's argument and go, you know, you got a point there, whatever. I'm so against this kind of this witch hunt against someone who kind of dissent, and that's even if the person is kind of half wrong. To me, the barrier I have is like, is a person being sincere or insincere? And that's distinct from them being right or wrong. It's like, are they being sincere? Like, are they trying to make an argument? Are they trying to make a point honestly and with some integrity and what they think and whatever? Are they trying to advance a point of view? Steel on steel, all that kind of stuff. It's all good. And more than that, I happen to actually not only agree with his right to make his point of view or that we should have it, I actually agree with a lot of the substance. You know, you can shoot me for that if you want to. There's no point getting into it. Watch his videos if you want to or whatever. But just, I hate the idea of a stagnant kind of cover each other's arses and kiss each other's arses and listen to each other all the time and repeat back the mantra that we've all kind of agreed on. It's just such a recipe for stagnation and funk, and it's just bad. I don't like it at all. It's you need a bit of discourse, genuine discourse, not this kind of little cult. I don't want to be part of a thing like that either. And maybe he got so like that he wanted to make a strong statement on that, as in I am officially not a nationalist, whatever. Everybody knows that he's not a nationalist. I think anyway. Like, you know, it's not like he's suddenly become some apolitical or like pure truth seeker. Clearly, the guy's watch his stuff, right? He's got his point of view. I think he's just trying to make a point that this whole cult thing and these point of views, some of which I don't agree with, I'm not in. If you think I'm in that agreed on thing, I'm not. And here's my argument, whatever. But I think he, in the same way as I would feel a little bit oppressed by being in this kind of clique and cult, to the point where you almost want to just duck and hide. You get uncomfortable with it. I think maybe he got a direct shot of that to the brain and just kind of went a bit further and was like, no. You know, and a lot of that is mixed with, and of course, if he ends up seeing this, you're free to come on and tell me if I'm mischaracterizing what you say or whatever. Look, or maybe we'll have a chat. But yeah, and he was talking to people who were like talking about all sorts of crazy theories and stuff, and it's a strange time and whatever. Anyway, I just think the saddest thing in the world would be like if I went away for 6 months and I came back and I was like, so what's gone on with some of this stuff? And someone said, oh, Keith Woods had this kind of abrasive argument and stuff that a lot of people disagreed with. And I went, oh yeah, how did that go? And I went, oh, we just trolled the shit out of him. We said, what, we don't like him, and he's what's the word, pariah now. We don't like him and he doesn't like us either, and it turned into this big whole thing. I'd be like, that'd be tragic. That's the last thing you want in any kind of group at all, I would say. And I basically agree with them on a lot. So you can call me a simp if you want to, but that's where I'm at. The Don as well. Actually, the Don, if you're still watching, big fan, and I'm looking forward to some videos from you. I don't know what your plan is going forward with your channel, but like, you know, for example, there's this whole thing now. You have Keith has his point of view. I have my point of view. Dave Cullen has his point of view. There's some of these people around the place. And a lot of those are very different. Like, for example, you take Dave Cullen, you take Keith Woods. Those are very diametric, somewhat anyway, largely different viewpoints. So to me, that's interesting. Again, that's not a source of like, oh, this is bad, we need to like get everyone on the same. It's like, no. You don't need to do that. And if you, insofar as you do want to push your point via the arguments, right? Openly. There's no hate. There's no, oh, I hate him now. Why would you hate someone you don't even know on the internet? You know, don't be silly, right? But it's a good thing to have that difference and have those arguments and have that debate. And my point about the Don is just to say that while I'm hearing this, I do think once in a while I go, do you know what I would love now is to hear Don's point of view on this. If there's one person in Ireland who I would, if they made a video and it said talking about this, that's the person I would sit back, put the tea on, and stop everything and listen to that. Not saying that maybe he should, whatever, but I'm just enjoying the chat here go by, but that's my point of view, and the reason I bring it up anyway is because I don't want to do drag this out with like an AMA and chatting. We could do that. I'm either going to leave it off until Monday, unless I get some shot of inspiration and want to do one tomorrow, but it's easy to turn on, easy to turn off. I'll either see you Monday or before then. And anyway, the reason I brought up, the reason Keith came up is because someone mentioned it in the chat. It's topical. And also because before I sat down to do this, I enjoy doing the streams or whatever. But what I did notice is that at some point, like yesterday, I think a YouTuber called them, the Don, oh wait, I have to stop now. The Don says he's not motivated by it these days. Fair enough. I completely understand that. And respect that. I think it would be good. I'm going to try to talk about other things as well and whatever. But anyway, and hopefully I will chat to you at some point on whether it's about something or other, or something or other, and whatever. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so I brought it up is because yesterday I think a YouTuber, the Iconoclast or someone like that, one of these, I think it's a British YouTuber anyway, who I know is pretty good, did a video being like addressing Keith Woods' post-truth thing, basically a disagreement, a kind of a response video, a critical, I imagine, response video to Keith Woods' thing. And I saw that go by. I went, oh, I must listen to that. I must see that. And I didn't get a chance to. And then tonight I see an upload happen, Keith Woods replying to your man's reply to him. So I go, brilliant. A lot of us have been thinking about, some people don't like Keith and all this, but either way you're thinking about his critique and all of that. And now we have a counter critique, and now we have a counter critique. And I have those two videos stored up, or I haven't seen them. And as soon as I sign off here, I'm going to watch one followed by the other. And I will, just in case you don't know what, sorry, the iconoclast and the distributist maybe are two different people. Okay, if I'm wrong, like I said, I'm not sure. I said your man. I'll post both videos on my Twitter afterwards. You're sure it's the distributist, yeah? I have to make sure so I don't just... Oh, Jesus. YouTube. Yeah. I think it is him, is it? Okay. The distributist. Sorry, I just have to open a YouTube page because I want to get it right. But again, it's like, I'm like, what, guys, we have, and here's another thing I agree with Keith on. I don't know if he makes this point, but if he does, I agree with it. Is ultimately we're competing with these like global neoliberalism and far leftism and all this kind of stuff. We need to have a really, really good ideology, and we're not going to get that by all just agreeing with each other and being like, oh, we don't want division and all this stuff. It's like, I'm not asking for, I hate blood sports and all that shit, which is why I'm saying when someone like Keith Woods comes along with a video and it's a critique, and even though you don't like all of it and stuff like that, take it for what it is. It's an argument, it's a critique, you know, except don't be like, you just make videos with Richard Spencer and you this and that and the other. I mean, what's the relevance of that to, I mean, you may have that point of view, but it's like, he made an argument, just go with that instead, right? Who cares? I'm not interested in what he does with this or that or whatever. I don't have any expectation of him to belong to a certain clique or any of that stuff. I don't care. That's just my point of view there. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, bear with me. I just have to get this right because I like to give credit to people where it's due, you know. Not that it matters. The person who I'm looking at here, his channel is probably like 20 times the size of mine, so it's like, it's not like I'm like giving him his big break or anything. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So I will link those on my Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, I'll put them in the description when the comments go up. I think the video usually takes a while to like process or whatever, but they will be in the comments afterwards when you're looking for them. And that's what I'm basically doing. I'm going to kind of chill out on the couch for a while, listen to those, absorb them, and it's going to be good. So like I say, I'll either talk to you during the weekend or on Monday, and have a good weekend. Don't get the virus, don't get arrested by the Stasi on the street if you can't walk in the park or whatever. Just look after yourself and have a good one. Anyway, so see ya. Good night.